As you said, my name is Simon Wilde, and I'm a volunteer mapper, validator, and new mapper coach with Crowd2Map. And I'm presenting this morning from Whadjuk Noongar country on the edge of the Perth metro area over in WA. And we're going to be talking about mapping to fight female genital mutilation in Tanzania. So who are we? Crowd2Map is a subsidiary project of the Tanzania Development Trust, which is a British Tanzania volunteer charity that has been operating projects in Tanzania with grassroots organisations for over 45 years. Crowd2Map itself is, again, a volunteer project. Initially, remote mapping is conducted by volunteers from around the world. And all you need is a bit of time and a good internet connection so you can access the data online. In addition to the remote mapping, communities on the ground and teams on the ground build on this initial data and produce fit for purpose local content that the whole community can use. I think you said it was your birthday, this organisation's birthday at the moment. It's also our birthday. We're 6 years old this year, and we've been celebrating that this month with a few other events. So what was the problem? The problem of FGM is the cutting of female genitalia for cultural or religious reasons. FGM is illegal in Tanzania. Prosecution rates have historically been low. Access to communities for activists and police was poor, maps didn't exist. And the project founder, Janet Chapman, who is the chair of the Tanzania Development Trust, was in Tanzania trying to reach communities and spent hours going around in circles because there was no access to any kind of map. And Janet saw an opportunity for a project to try and improve that and sort out to initiate this project to improve digital maps in Tanzania. So the girls are rounded up in cutting seasons, and cutting seasons can depend on cultural groups and clans, and the prevalence of FGM in Tanzania, you can see, is mostly concentrated in the northeast of the country, but the seasonal variation of the activity can be based around clan activity, and groups in Tanzania have used our data to help them map clan locations, so activists can be in the right place at the right time of year to try and educate people and reduce the incidence of FGM. Second part of the problem is the map. In the upper pane, you can see the OpenStreetMap of Dar es Salaam, capital of Tanzania. And you can see that's as well mapped as any place we would expect to open Google Maps in our own environment here in Australia. In the bottom pane, you can see an OpenStreetMap area that represents an area of rural Tanzania. And you can see maybe one significant road passing through the lower right-hand corner and a few other minor roads. But there are actually 10,000 people that are not represented by any kind of map in that space. We needed to do something about that. There are safe houses out there for girls and their families to escape to, but they can't find them. There were no maps. And the safe house staff can't find them to rescue them. Activists can't find the communities to go and help do outreach work and community education. Tanzania Development Trust and Crowd2Map work with an organisation on the ground called Hope for Girls and Women at Tanzania. And the lady in the main picture with a purple shirt is called Robi Samweli. Robi is a FGM survivor, and her procedure went wrong and she was pretty much left dead. She survived the procedure and started this organisation which runs some safe houses and enables girls to get some education and live in safety while they can be reconciled with their own communities and eventually go back there. Robi told her story at a UN special panel on FGM in New York in 2018. And if you're interested in listening to that, I think that's available on YouTube. So the solution was maps. We needed to find maps and make maps to improve the coverage in rural Tanzania, to help people get around, and not only for FGM purposes, but also for all sorts of community access to health and government services. So Crowd2Map are making these maps. We have been doing this since October 2015. Excuse me. We have had over 16,000 volunteers. It's probably nearer 20,000 at the moment. And people come and go. We have quite a high attrition rate. So not all of those 16,000 are mapping all at once. Contributors are from global locations, and every continent is represented in our demographic, and many countries. And over this last 6 years, we've mapped over 5.5 million buildings and over 300,000 kilometers of roads. And the current figure for the square kilometers is probably something like 15,000 square kilometers have been mapped. In side projects, we've added over 10,000 points of interest, especially projects for water points and health facilities to improve community engagement with safe services. So the remote mapping occurs on a platform called Humanitarian OpenStreetMap Team. This platform hosts many projects from around the world. And if you see an event on the news, such as a landslide or a cyclone in another country, often there are projects on HOT to improve maps for aid services to go in and help in those areas. And that can be anything from a hurricane in the Caribbean to an Ebola outbreak in the DRC. We're going to start with something called the ID editor, which you can see on the screen there. And this is a more basic editing tool, but that has actually come along in the last few years and is now much more versatile and powerful than it has been. More advanced users use something called JOSM, which stands for Java for OpenStreetMap. And that's an editor that has validation tools and advanced editing tools. And people like myself go back and do retroactive work and validate other users' work and offer feedback to newer users via this tool. So what are we actually adding? We are adding basic features. This is remote satellite mapping. We can't give a great deal of detail to it, and we cannot make too many assumptions about the data we are seeing. So we're adding basic features like buildings, and this is normally restricted in rural areas to rectangular and circular buildings. You can see a few of those highlighted on the editor there. And generic roads, we only map two types of road really, and it's difficult to classify roads in rural areas from satellite imagery. There is a guide that we use. It's something called Highway Tag Africa, which is on the OSM wiki. But as you can imagine, trying to define a hierarchy of rural roads for a whole continent is, yeah, it's like trying to catch fog in a net. It is a generic system, and it's not always applicable to the area you're working in. A lot of people ask us if we have tried to use artificial intelligence to help us, and surely we can just click a button and everything will appear in front of us and we can move on. Unfortunately, it's not quite that good. We have used artificial intelligence for a couple of projects, and the current efforts that we have access to are driven by Facebook with Maxar imagery and with Bing through Microsoft and their own imagery. Unfortunately, the two data sets are poles apart. There can be anything up to 10 years difference in the open data availability of these imageries. And as such, one concentrates on roads, the other concentrates on buildings, and it makes it difficult to use both of them in a single project. In our experience, it's also created quite a bit of retrospective work and remedial work to fix initial mapping. As you can see here, this is an example from a Crowd2Map project where the artificial intelligence has picked out some roads and some buildings. And that looks kind of okay, but when you drill down into the detail, the way the nodes are arranged on the roads can be inconsistent with the hierarchy. It often leaves stubs. Building orientations are often slightly off, which need to be corrected, and building sizing can be off by around 10% as well. So while it's a useful tool and probably will be a lot more useful in the future, right now we haven't found it. We found it helpful, but it doesn't solve all of our problems. So how do we connect these 16,000 volunteers? We use a platform called Slack, which if you're not familiar with it, it's a team environment, and this allows us to have multiple channels where we can engage with our volunteers. We welcome them, we provide training materials for them, and we also provide feedback on their work to allow them to grow and develop as contributors to the project. Training and retaining mappers is always a challenge. This kind of project has quite a high attrition rate. We lose around 70% of new mappers within the first week. People think it's a great idea and then just find it doesn't suit them, or they don't feel they're contributing at a level they want to contribute at. And this became more pronounced during the lockdowns of 2020. We saw huge numbers of people around the world wanting to do something useful with their time and contribute to a cause. So from between sort of March and August last year, while the lockdowns were spreading through Europe and then the Americas, we had several thousand new mappers. And we only have a small number of feedback and coaching volunteers. And we were kind of overwhelmed. At that time, I wasn't working, and I was putting in sort of 7 to 9 hour days, just putting in feedback to volunteers to try and keep people motivated, keep them engaged, and keep building their skills. We had some initial training resources, and we realized that we probably needed to expand these to enable us to function a bit better. And we researched some platforms that we could use to do this, and we ended up using something called Canvas, and we also wanted to produce badges to incentivize and motivate people to actually undertake the training, and for that we used a platform that can be linked to Canvas called Badger, and on the right of the screen there you can see the badges that we're currently using for Highways 101, and the top one is actually Buildings 101. And the objective of these was really to address the most common rookie errors that we were seeing, and try and reduce the amount of very, very basic feedback that we were having to give people. So things like getting started on the platform and the basics of mapping accurately for buildings and highways. We hope to make people more independent, and ultimately, we wanted to produce people who could go off and map unsupported. And while we prefer them to stay with Crowd2Map, obviously, we hope to produce people who could go off and contribute to other humanitarian OpenStreetMap projects and do so in a meaningful way. So beyond remote contributions, Crowd2Map also operates on the ground. We train field teams in Tanzania who can go out on the ground with smartphones, and using apps like maps.me, they can contribute offline to the map, and this is uploaded at a later date once they are in a position to get on a network and upload the data. Mobile phone data in sub-Saharan Africa, you can probably see in the middle panel there that there's quite a large uptake of populations. 80 and 90% of certainly men in sub-Saharan Africa have access to mobile phones, but as you might be able to see the difference between the red bars and the green bars there are gender gaps in in mobile phone ownership. There are also gender gaps in internet usage in sub-Saharan Africa. And these gaps are much higher in rural areas. So the people who maybe need access to these maps and to be able to find their way and to be able to be connected to agencies where they can report gender-based violence and FGM, they don't have access. And that's something we seek to do in another project. So this is a team out mapping locally in Tanzania. What you can see there is a team of trained field volunteers. They're actually mapping water points. The group of people in the background there are actually standing around a water pump. And this enables people to find clean water sources that are drilled, rather than water sources that are maybe surface water sources that may be contaminated or unhealthy. Other users include the police. This is Sajali. She's a police officer from a gender desk in Mugumu town. A lot of the rural police stations do have officers who are dedicated to, or part of their job is gender issues. But again, they were unable to reach communities, even if they had news of FGM activities or gender-based violence activities. They struggled to reach these communities to take action because they weren't able to travel in time and in good order to reach these places. So they lacked the maps, and they also use the maps that we make on OpenStreetMap to help them with their work. As a result of a grant from USAID via Humanitarian OpenStreetMap in 2019, Tanzania Development Trust got some money from the Women Connect Challenge. This allowed the project to train and instill digital champions in villages. And these people were given smartphones, trained how to use them, trained how to contribute data to the map. And these smartphones were also used as a whole resource. They had micro SD cards installed in them with literature and documentation that could help them educate their communities. This takes the project to a local level, and it's really important that this isn't just a remote mapping effort that people from afar are just imposing data. It needs to be translated onto the ground and into fit for purpose information for the people in their own space. So they're building a community of contributors, and apps like Maps.me also allow people to route find, and this helps with time management and accessing communities, and also things like simple as fuel planning. It's made a big difference with how the teams can get out into the field and their ability to do that with more planning available to them and through route finding. So the digital champions will add features such as pharmacies, churches, clinics, police stations, and safe places. This is it starts to go beyond just FGM and start building digital communities in place. And they also use things like Open Data Kit to record this information. And at the moment, there are over 151 trained digital champions in 3 or maybe 4 regions of Northeast Tanzania. And the program keeps growing as phones can be provided. Members of the community are trained, and the retention rate is very good. I believe that the first part of this project from the grant, there was a little over 80 people trained as digital champions, and they are all still with the project and still working to improve their communities. Quite often, if paper maps can be displayed in villages, it's often the first time people have seen their environment represented in this way, and that also produces challenges in actually getting printed copies out there. I think we all know the challenges of the cost of printer ink, and I don't think it's any different elsewhere in the world. This is Sophia. She's one of the digital champions. And they all have a great commitment to educating their communities and developing them and making them safer places. So after 6 years of mapping, what have we actually achieved? Roby at Hope for Girls and Women believes that in the course of these 6 years, they have helped over 3,000 girls find safe houses and avoid being cut. It's also coincided with a reduction of 75% reduction in the death rate from FGM, and also increased prosecutions by the police. Other projects that the digital champions are involved with, we also provide an app called Naru, which helps communities identify crop pests and crop diseases on such important crops as maize, and this helps them improve their yield and ultimately the nutritional profile of the community. Recently, a couple of weeks ago, there was a 6th birthday event for Crowd2Map, and that's actually recorded on YouTube, and there's a couple of hours there of people speaking from communities connected to the Tanzania Development Trust and how mapping has influenced their community and improved their communities, and that's well worth a listen if you've got the time. So here's some resources. Crowd2Map.org is the first landing point if you're interested in finding out more about the project or coming to give us a hand. Tanzania Development Trust also has its own website. We operate on the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team platform, and that's where you would need to log in and have an account if you wanted to contribute. If you want to know more about Roby's story, you can find that on hopeforgirlsandwomen.com. And I believe the UN session is also on YouTube. If you're familiar with Slack and you want to come and see what we do there, please search for Crowd2Map Tanzania on Slack and you will find us. And where are we next? You can find us next at Janet will be speaking at State of the Map Africa, which starts today and runs for 3 days. Which is a virtual online conference, and she's also speaking on Monday at the HOT Virtual Summit, which is Humanitarian OpenStreetMap's annual online conference. So thanks for your time. If you'd like to get in touch, please do. If you'd like to contribute, come join us, please. You can find us on all the usual suspects on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can find Janet and myself on LinkedIn. And if you're interested in seeing some of the other presentations that Janet has given, if you search Crowd2Map in YouTube, you will find a bunch of resources there. And Janet speaks very well on this project. She's been involved since the inception of it and has worked very hard to develop it. So thank you for your time this morning. Thanks for listening. I hope this provided some insight into what we're doing in Tanzania. And how we're trying to build better digital communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. That was really, that was great. And yeah, so thank you also for providing avenues on how to get involved. You've just presented to a room full of spatially inquisitive people, either working in GIS or mapping, so there might be the potential people who are interested in getting involved with this excellent project. Are there any questions for Simon? I will. All righty, no worries. Well, there is his obviously kicking in. Well, yeah, no questions at this point, but there is, Simon's details are there to contact him later. And Janet is going to be our first Nat Chat for the year on the 2nd of February. So we have the honour of hearing from her then. And yeah, we'll hear more about some of the projects that she's working on. So thank you again, Simon, for your time. I know it's super early over there in Perth. I appreciate you getting up and being a part of this conference with us. And yeah, making a new connection. This is really good. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.